What if the person you trusted the most, the one you grew up with, laughed with, dreamed with, and finally married, was hiding the darkest secret of all? This isn't just a story of love gone wrong. It's a chilling reminder that even the warmest smiles can mask the coldest intentions. Today, on The Twisted Minds, we uncover the shocking case of Sam Abraham, a man who married his childhood sweetheart, never realizing that behind her innocent face lay a sinister plan. But before we begin, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to The Twisted Minds for more true stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Sam Abraham's life began in a small Indian town where dreams were modest, but hearts were big. And among the people who filled his childhood memories, there was always one constant: Sylvia, the girl who lived next door. They were inseparable as children, laughing over silly games, sharing food during school breaks, and whispering promises that they would always stay by each other's side. Neighbors often teased them, saying they looked like a couple even back then, and though Sam blushed, he secretly liked the idea. As the years went on, life pulled Sam's family in a different direction when they migrated to Australia, chasing better opportunities and leaving behind the simple village life. Sylvia stayed in India, and with time the childhood bond faded into a distant memory, though never completely erased. Many years later, fate, or what Sam believed to be fate, intervened when he reconnected with Sylvia through social media. What began as casual messages turned into hours of conversation, and soon the old connection sparked into something stronger, something more intimate. Sam was amazed at how the girl he remembered had transformed into a graceful woman, someone who carried herself with poise and spoke with a charm that drew him in completely. To him, it felt as though destiny had been quietly working all these years to reunite them. While some members of his family advised him to be cautious, to remember that people change with time and distance, Sam's heart had already made its choice. He ignored their hesitations and decided to meet her again, flying to India with nervous excitement, his heart racing at the thought of turning a childhood promise into a lifelong commitment. When he finally saw her, memories of the past and the sweetness of the present collided in a rush of emotion, and before long he asked her to marry him. It seemed like a fairy tale, the kind of story that made others believe in love again. Two childhood friends separated by time and oceans, only to reunite and bind themselves in marriage. But beneath Sylvia's gentle smile and graceful demeanor, there were layers Sam could not see. She was charming and affectionate in public, yet often cold and calculating when it was just the two of them. Small moments would reveal glimpses of impatience, sharp remarks, and a strange detachment, but Sam brushed them aside as stress or mood swings. He told himself that love required patience, that marriage was about compromise, and that the warmth of his heart would eventually win hers completely. He clung to the nostalgic image of the little girl who once held his hand in the dusty schoolyard, never imagining that the woman she had become was hiding a mind darker than he could ever comprehend. For Sam, marrying Sylvia was the fulfillment of a lifelong dream. But what he did not realize was that for Sylvia, it was the beginning of something far more sinister. Sylvia's new life in Australia should have been the fresh beginning she once dreamed of, but almost immediately the cracks began to show, though Sam, blinded by love, tried desperately not to see them. At first everything looked picture perfect, a small but cozy home, laughter over shared dinners, moments of tenderness that reminded him why he had fought to bring his childhood love across oceans. But slowly, Sylvia's frustrations began to spill out in subtle ways. She complained about the weather, about being away from her family, about the cultural differences, and especially about money. Nothing ever seemed enough, and Sam, who worked hard every day to provide, was left feeling as though he was falling short despite giving his all. He noticed her growing restlessness, the way she spent long hours on her phone, whispering into it with a sly smile, cutting the call abruptly whenever he entered the room. His friends and family started to notice changes too. Sylvia was controlling, sharp with her words, and often insisted on having full access to his finances and daily routines, slowly tightening her grip on his life. Arguments became more frequent behind closed doors. Yet Sam, ever the peacemaker, told himself it was only part of the adjustment period, that marriages were never perfect in the beginning. But Sylvia was not adjusting, she was calculating. Unknown to Sam, her unhappiness was not merely about distance from India, or the struggle of a new country. It was about desire and greed. She had secretly rekindled a relationship with a lover back in India, someone who promised her excitement and passion that she claimed she lacked with Sam. Their conversations were not innocent exchanges of longing, but instead turned into whispered plots, where fantasies of a new life together bled into dark discussions of how to rid herself of her husband once and for all. Divorce would have been the logical path, but Sylvia did not want the stain of failure, nor the loss of financial security. She wanted freedom and wealth, a new life without the burden of shame or compromise. Sam, meanwhile, continued to see only the girl he once adored, convincing himself that time and patience would mend the cracks. He cooked for her, planned small outings, sent messages of affection, and worked longer hours to save for their future, never realizing that his every effort was wasted on someone who had already chosen betrayal. In her mind, Sam was no longer her husband or childhood sweetheart. He was an obstacle standing between her and the life she desired, an obstacle she intended to remove, not through arguments or separation, but through something far more final. What once seemed to Sam like the story of true love had quietly begun to rot from the inside, and while he dreamed of building a future with Sylvia, she was already plotting his end, her heart and mind consumed not with love, but with a deadly determination. It began quietly, almost invisibly, with Sylvia spending late nights hunched over her phone, scrolling through articles and forums that no loving wife should ever be reading, her eyes searching for the perfect way to end a life without leaving a trace. And though Sam sometimes asked why she stayed awake so long, she would smile sweetly and murmur excuses about being homesick or chatting with relatives in India. But in reality, her mind had wandered far beyond loneliness. She had already made the chilling decision that her marriage to Sam was nothing more than a trap. She needed to escape, and the only way out, the only way to keep her reputation clean and her pockets full, was through his death. At first, her thoughts were scattered, wild ideas born of anger and greed, but soon they sharpened into plans, and those plans took form through whispered conversations with her secret lover back home, where expressions of passion were laced with sinister strategies. She began experimenting in small ways, slipping mild substances into Sam's meals, watching quietly as he complained of nausea, dizziness, and stomach pains, never once suspecting that the woman serving him dinner was deliberately testing how much harm she could inflict without getting caught. Doctors suggested stress, perhaps dietary issues, and Sam, ever the optimist, accepted these explanations, returning home to the very source of his suffering, smiling at his wife and thanking her for taking care of him. Each time he recovered, Sylvia realized she had to be more precise, more ruthless. Her late night research grew darker, leading her to the knowledge of cyanide, a substance so lethal that even a tiny dose could end a life swiftly. And unlike the slow poisons she had toyed with before, cyanide would ensure there would be no prolonged suffering, no drawn-out suspicion, just a quick collapse followed by a tragic explanation of sudden death. To Sam, Sylvia remained the woman he had loved since childhood, the person he believed fate had returned to him after years of distance, and he poured every ounce of his heart into protecting that bond, blind to the reality that each affectionate word and each warm meal was being used to sharpen the knife aimed at his back. He had no reason to distrust her, no reason to imagine that the smile he adored was nothing more than a mask concealing calculations of time, dosage, and opportunity. To Sylvia, the plan was becoming exhilarating. Every step drew her closer to freedom and to the arms of the man she secretly adored overseas. The idea of living without Sam, of claiming his life insurance and property, of walking away unburdened by divorce or disgrace, consumed her thoughts until the act no longer felt monstrous but necessary, almost justified in her twisted reasoning. Friends and family noticed Sylvia's strange behavior, but could not piece it together. They only saw the occasional argument, the chill in her voice, the way she distanced herself from Sam in social gatherings. Nobody imagined that the same woman would one day measure out a lethal dose of cyanide with steady hands. Her mind focused not on guilt, but on the life she believed awaited her after her husband's death. Sam, in his tragic innocence, never once suspected that the greatest danger in his life was not out in the world, but sitting across the dinner table, waiting patiently for the night when love would transform into murder. The night it all came to a horrifying end seemed like any other, quiet and uneventful, with Sam returning home after a long day of work, exhausted yet grateful to come back to the woman he still believed was his soulmate. And as he set his bag down and settled into the small comfort of their home, Sylvia greeted him with a smile that, to him, meant love but in reality masked a sinister triumph. She had prepared dinner carefully, each dish laced with care and precision, and as she set the table she placed before him the drink that carried within it the invisible weapon she had chosen. Cyanide, carefully measured, ready to claim his life. Sam, oblivious and trusting, raised the glass to his lips, never once hesitating, never imagining that the woman he had loved since childhood would hand him death disguised as devotion. Within minutes the poison began to work, his body convulsing, his face contorting in agony as his breaths grew shallow and desperate, his hands clutching at his chest while his eyes widened with confusion and fear, silently begging for help. But Sylvia did not rush to his side, did not cradle him with the tenderness of a wife watching her husband suffer. Instead, she stood coldly, watching the life drain from the man who had given her everything, her heart unmoved as his body collapsed onto the floor. By the time paramedics arrived, called in a performance of panic she staged for appearances, it was already too late. Sam Abraham was pronounced dead, his bright life extinguished in a matter of minutes, leaving behind a trail of shock and sorrow in the community that adored him. At first, whispers of grief filled the air, and many believed it was a sudden natural death, perhaps a heart attack, or some unexplained medical condition, and Sylvia played her role flawlessly, crying when expected, speaking softly of her loss, accepting condolences with downcast eyes. But not everyone was convinced. Neighbors had heard the arguments, seen the distance between them, and some remembered how strangely detached she appeared in the days following his death. Investigators, sensing something off, ordered an autopsy, and that single decision unraveled the carefully constructed farce Sylvia had built. Tests revealed traces of cyanide in Sam's system, a discovery so shocking it transformed the case from a tragic loss into a homicide investigation. As police dug deeper, they seized Sylvia's phone and uncovered the chilling conversations with her lover in India. Messages that revealed not only betrayal but meticulous planning, from discussions of poisoning methods to fantasies of a new life together. Once Sam was gone, what once seemed like a love story had morphed into a crime that horrified everyone who had known the couple. And as the truth emerged, the mask Sylvia wore slipped away, exposing the ruthless woman who had calculated her husband's death, while he still gazed at her with the same innocent love he had carried since childhood. For Sam's family and friends, the news was unbearable, a sickening confirmation that the woman they had welcomed into their lives was the very person who had stolen him from them in the most merciless way imaginable. The trial that followed became a spectacle of heartbreak and horror, a stage where the mask Sylvia had worn for years was finally ripped away, exposing the cold truth that stunned even the most seasoned investigators. And as prosecutors laid out the evidence, the autopsy results, the text messages exchanged with her lover, the late night searches about poisons and cyanide, an unshakable portrait emerged of a woman who had turned the sacred bond of marriage into a calculated plot for money and freedom. In the courtroom, Sam's family sat shattered, their grief spilling into every word and every tear as they listened to how the boy, who once dreamed of a better life, who carried his childhood love across oceans and gave her everything he could, had been betrayed in the most brutal way by the very woman he trusted most. Friends who testified recalled the arguments they had witnessed, the way Sylvia often controlled Sam, and how he, in his innocence, never once doubted her intentions, clinging instead to the memory of the girl he had loved since they were children. But as the prosecution presented Sylvia's chillingly casual discussions with her lover about killing Sam, it became clear that she had not acted out of sudden anger or desperation, but out of greed and ambition, a desire to start a new life on the blood of the man who adored her. The defense attempted to paint her as misunderstood, a woman trapped in a marriage she could not escape, but no excuse could erase the cold facts of cyanide in Sam's body and the trail of digital evidence that led straight to her. When the verdict was read, declaring her guilty, the courtroom fell silent before the weight of justice echoed through every corner. And though Sam's family felt a moment of relief, it was quickly replaced with the deep, unshakable pain of knowing that no sentence, no punishment, could bring him back. Sylvia was handed down years behind bars, her freedom stripped, her dreams of a new life with her lover shattered, and though she sat in the defendant's chair with a hardened face, the truth was undeniable. She had lost everything by chasing greed and betraying love. For the world outside, the story of Sam Abraham became a chilling reminder that not all love stories end with happiness, that sometimes the very people we trust with our hearts can turn into the architects of our downfall. His story spread beyond his community, told as both a tragedy and a warning that blind devotion can sometimes hide deadly shadows. In the quiet moments after the trial, Sam's family remembered him not as a victim, but as a kind, generous man who had given his heart fully, a man whose greatest flaw was that he believed too deeply in love. And while Sylvia now lived behind prison walls, the memory of Sam lived on, carried in the tears of those who loved him, and in the haunting truth that he had died not at the hands of a stranger, but in the home he built, beside the woman he trusted with his life. If you found this story as shocking and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the Twisted Minds for more true stories that reveal the darkest corners of human nature.